We're joined by Gerard Holland, CEO of Page Research Centre. Great to have you here in the studio, Gerard. Where you belong, here in the studio. Last time you were out in the bush somewhere. Now you're back here. Good to have you here. If you were out in the bush or anywhere else in New South Wales, you wouldn't have been able to use a dishwasher. You wouldn't have been able to turn on your air conditioning. Yet again, we learn that renewables somehow or other aren't quite up to the job, Gerard.
Well, and that's exactly right, Rowan. It wouldn't be a surprise to anyone that on Wednesday of this week, we're all told not to use our pool pumps, our dishwashers, our air conditioners, lest the entire grid collapse due to one unscheduled outage out at Eraring Power Station. Now, the reason for this is simple. We have massively overinvested in renewables. The vast majority, 80% of investment over the last 10 years has gone towards intermittent and unreliable power, and we've underinvested in that baseload capacity in the grid. And since we've taken out 3.5 gigawatts at Liddell, since we've taken out that capacity at Hazelwood, we haven't put new baseload power in, but our reliance on coal hasn't changed. So all of these existing stations, which are ageing, are getting older. They're getting absolutely smashed, being ramped at a much higher capacity because we're asking them to do the job that a more stable grid was doing historically when we had more coal and more baseload power in our grid.
Well, we had that overinvestment in renewables, but at the same time, underinvestment in what actually works at this stage, which is fossil fuels. And our emissions are going up under the Albanese government. This has been a complaint of the Greens. Well, we're paying more, we've got unreliability, and we're not even meeting the emissions cuts. So exactly where is the win on the board here?
Well, this is the frustration, is that we've been promised that renewables would be cheaper and they would be cleaner. And they're evidently not cheaper. We're building lots and lots of diffuse machines that we're only using part of the time that are pushing up those spot prices, particularly in later in the evening when solar and wind aren't producing electricity. But at the same time, they're not cleaner either. Once you factor in the entire lifespan of these installations, how many times you have to replace them, you're only reducing emissions by about 40% than our existing coal fleet. At the same time, you're destroying farmland, you're destroying our national parks, you're having these massive build-outs of industrial plants, but also all the distribution and transmission lines as well. And so they're not better for the environment. They're certainly not cheaper. So you start to wonder, well, how have we even gotten down this path?
James.
And, tell us a bit more about this claim here, because Chris Bowen goes out and he says, no. And he insists, though, that renewables are the cheapest form of energy. And yet we had a spot price hit, I think, $16,000 or $17,000 per megawatt hour at one point this week. At the same time, the Premier here in New South Wales is saying, please don't come home and turn on the air conditioner even though your house is hot because you've been out at work all day. Don't do that, please. There seems to be a lot of fiddling around the numbers. We hear terms like integrated service plan and things like that. Tell us about what's actually happening with these numbers, because it seems to me like Chris Bowen and, frankly, a lot of the energy regulators are being really disingenuous here.
So I think there's two important things happening there, James. The first one is that a system is not a market. So proving that you can produce low-cost energy at a very small fraction of the day does not then mean that over the course of a 24-hour period that you can push prices lower. And that's the first problem, is that because renewables only operate a couple of hours, it comes in those gushes and rushes. It means that you're much more reliant on peaking power, and that traditional cheaper power of baseload, rather than trucking along all day, you're then having to turn it on in demand times when the renewables can't meet that demand. So that's what leads to that fluctuating spot price that you mentioned. But the other important thing to mention is that the integrated system plan is basically marking its own homework. It's assuming that the government's policy position of 80% renewables by 2030 and all of the battery storage, that will happen with no delays. It assumes modelling on prices where most of those best sites, all those gold sites, are already taken, and so they're not factoring in it's going to get more and more expensive to build more onshore wind and solar, especially as you get further out in the grid. And so it's not a fair reflection of the full system cost of producing that electricity.
If they also want to see how government works, you should take them down to the Snowy Mountain. They could go and stand in the tunnel with Florence the Machine and see how effective they are.